to our third episode of the Football Review Show, and I'm your host, KIrk Buchner. I operate NotInHallOfFame.com, at the fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, the fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and of course, the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. Vote now, www.NotInHallOfFame.com/USA. I think I said that wrong. NotInHallOfFame.com/USA. There we go. And you will vote on the first ever class, and it's all up to you because it's actual democracy. Insert political joke here.
Well, say something about the U.S. political climate, but I'm going to resist that. I'm just a guest host here.
But it's not just a guest host. Well, first, my regular co-host, Paul Lawrence. Paul, thanks again for doing this. This has been a lot of fun, and looking back at this game, Super Bowl VI, it was very, very a lot of fun. And I thought we were going to ask the co-host of the Classic Sports Review. Although we're kind of veering off on our shows. Next one we're doing is fake roller skating.
Yes, which roller skating is a sport, but is it a legit sport when it's rigged?
Yeah, and my dog Jasper agrees. You can follow him on Jasper_the_friendly corgi on Instagram. If he's gonna bark, I might as well just get a plug in there for something. But so with me is the Intercontinental. We figured this out. Triathlete champion, because he's champion in Buffalo and successfully defended that title in Antarctica. And if I say it enough times, it'll appear on his Wikipedia page. It's Glenn Paslawski. How you doing?
Good. How you doing today? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You're doing double duty. I'm gonna have to change a T-shirt, I think, later on, so it looks like I'm.
No, I was going to inquire about that. If we have to change wardrobes just to make it look like we're doing this on a different day.
Well, they'll probably go up on different days because adding all the video and all that stuff is not as much fun. But we last one we did was Super Bowl III, and Paul suggested that we just bypass Super Bowl IV and V. I think that's pretty much a good idea. It wasn't necessarily that they weren't interesting games. It's just I don't know if there was anything that really needed to sort of be said here. But we've got the start of a dynasty here. And I think
I thought maybe, Kurt, if you want to quickly just to kind of refresh people why we maybe didn't focus on those. I made a couple of notes here.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of highlights for folks since we're not going to dive into these games. So, yeah, I mean, Super Bowl IV, that was the first Super Bowl won by the Kansas City Chiefs, 23-7 over Minnesota. That was a second consecutive upset by what was then the AFL over the NFL. Actually, Minnesota in that game was a 13.5 point favorite, but it evened up the Super Bowl score at that point, 2 games for each league. And that was the last World Championship game of the NFL and the AFL. The merger began to be implemented the following season. It's not a game that has a lot of highlights to it. A couple of interesting side notes. So Len Dawson was the MVP. The Chiefs had actually 10 future Hall of Famers, including 8 players on that team. They were a very successful team in the AFL during that decade. Kind of, you might recall they lost Super Bowl I to the Packers. This became kind of their song as well as for the entire AFL before the merger. Probably the most infamous part of that whole game, interesting enough, is that the coach Hank Scram was actually mic'd by NFL The Films. One of the first times that had ever happened is certainly in a Super Bowl. And there's a lot of clips of him. And of course, we all know the most famous line, quote, "Just keep articulating down the field, boys." And you see that clip every time the NFL Network or NFL Films, right, has highlights of Super Bowls in that game. So that was that one. And then a year later, we have the infamous blunder or blooper bowl, which was Super Bowl V, Baltimore 16, Dallas 13. A couple interesting things about that game. That was the first Super Bowl decided at the end of the game on a field goal. That's how Baltimore ended up winning that with 3 seconds left in the game. There were 11 total turnovers in that game. To this date, this game does not rank anywhere near the best Super Bowls in history. In fact, it was one of the worst. 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter. And a still Super Bowl record of 7 total turnovers by the Colts. And they won that game. So kind of crazy, but it was a bit of a redemption, right, for the Colts, who lost Super Bowl III. So John Mackey and Johnny Unitas, we talked about them as being key players in that Super Bowl, got their ring. And what do we know, Kurt, is also the most famous part of that Super Bowl, which has not yet been repeated in Super Bowl history. That is, the MVP came from the losing side.
Oh,
Chuck,
yes. Mm-hmm.
who's the next member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, finally, is and remains the only losing player to be chosen MVP, because the voters chose that before the last second field goal. He had 2 turnovers and was the best player in that game, but lost the field goal. So just a bit of a historical catch up for folks to realize, no, we didn't cover those 2 games, but they actually happened.
So did Super Bowl VI, except for about 5 minutes of this. You'd think they would have complete footage, but they don't.
Yeah.
So this takes place in New Orleans at Tulane Stadium on January 18th, 1972. So how did we get here? The 4 playoff teams in the AFC, we had Miami, Cleveland, Kansas City, and Baltimore. Miami beat Kansas City in overtime 27-4. Miami, and then just crushed Baltimore 21-0. Dallas was one of 4 playoff teams in the NFC with Minnesota, San Francisco, and Washington. I didn't even remember San Francisco even having a playoff team in the 70s.
Yeah, they were pretty good, actually.
Well, not good enough.
Yeah.
Because Dallas beat Minnesota 20-12, and then they easily beat San Francisco in the conference final 14-3. So Dallas enters as a 6-point favorite, which is, if you're a gambling person, this is where you would probably make your wager. Here's what you all should do right now. If you're a fan of gambling like I am, even though I lose a lot, but I still always try to do the best I can. BetStamp helps me do that. So whatever the odds are, let's say so Dallas enters with that 6-point thing, but you got a real feeling that I don't know. I like this Don Shula kid. He might prove himself worthy one day. I don't know. So maybe he's going to be able to sort of like beat that spread. So you want to find the best spread that you can. If you can find something better, BetStamp will do that. You just download that app right now, and just put down your put the promo code Buck25. Why? Because I'm the Buck and I'm not 25. I don't know why I didn't $1.50, because I am 50. That would have made sense.
And it's sort of a good, interesting set of teams here, right? So just to kind of refresh over the time we're at, the Dolphins were a relatively new franchise. They were added to the what was in the AFL in 1966. Didn't as a new franchise in any league, right? Struggled for a few years. Don Shula left the Colts, right? Remember him for Super Bowl III.
Yep.
In 1970, and became the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, and of course would then set the stage for his historical coaching career. He inherited Bob Greasy and Jim Click and Larry Kazanka and Nick Bonacchini, but began to build the team and the coaching staff. And in very few seasons, right? 1966. Here we are in 1971. They've raised to the top in what is now the AFC to make it to the Super Bowl. The Cowboys, 1960 NFL expansion team. We have talked to them about before because we covered the Ice Bowl in our series earlier. And at this point, they were really tagged with that label of next year's champions. A famous book that was written by a local writer in the Dallas media at the time, because they had come off 5 seasons of terrible, disappointing playoff losses. The first 2 to the Green Bay Packers in what was then the NFL championship game. And then 2 back-to-back terrible losses to the Cleveland Browns. And then, of course, as I just referred to a few minutes ago, they lost Super Bowl V to the Colts. So here's a team built along a lot of talent, a lot of veterans had been together, a few key acquisitions that we're going to talk about, and of course the historical coach Tom Landry. And the other interesting is in this season, they started off fairly sluggish, and it was only around, I think, Game 7 that Landry finally, he was rotating quarterbacks between Roger Staubach, Craig Morton. Craig Morton had gotten the team to Super Bowl the year before. Staubach was still, finding his roots, and he was not the established starter until midway through this season, and took the team on a roll. And he is on his way, of course, to a Hall of Fame career. But it's interesting, the 71 season started with high expectations, a lot of uncertainty, this label of next year's championships. Unsettled at quarterback, a very solid defense, a very solid running game we're going to hear about. But we're able to kind of push this all the way through. And here they are in what will be, hopefully, right, the redemption game.
Mm-hmm. So with the broadcast, we don't get, it's just basically a cold open. This is the, again, most complete coverage we have available. Our broadcasters are Ray Scott and Pat Summerall. But Summerall's doing color, and Ray Scott sucks. I'm just going to be blunt. This guy sucks. He got everything. He was getting shit wrong left and right. He didn't know how to, he would get the players who were tackling wrong, especially on Miami. Was he drinking a lot, you think? Could be.
Oh,
he can't count. I'm following everything along, like all the play-by-play and Pro Football Reference, and I just stopped counting how many times he got the yardage wrong. He got the clock wrong a couple times too.
the only thing that I would maybe give him a break is maybe the spotter technology wasn't there back for Super Bowl VI, where you have people talking in his ear saying, okay, this guy made the tackle at this yard line. I mean, you got to remember, this is back in 72. So
the hash marks there, he can see.
Yeah, any good play-by-play guy will tell you that it's a good thing I got a spotter because I don't always see everything.
Well,
and that's how telecasts are, especially in football. I mean, hockey, it's a different thing because it's closer. Baseball, it's a relaxed pace of play. Football, if you combine the announcer probably drinking in the booth with having to look way across the field, yeah, you do need a spotter.
I will say, though, he was more professional than the last announcer that Glenn and I watched. We did the last WHA game, and wow. Yeah, what was the line he basically he wanted to take home the female producer.
Yes, they were looking to steal something from the last WHA game, and obviously his color commentator couldn't come up with anything quick enough to save him, and so Mr. Play-by-Play Man decided to take the producer because she looks cute.
and there was
also the days.
There was also somebody in a full chicken costume.
Yeah.
A full chicken.
We saw none of that in this Super Bowl, which I'm kind of disappointed.
No. I don't know. 80 for Brady. Maybe that would have been something those crazy old tweets would have done. I think someone really needs to do a wellness check on Jane Fonda, though. I'm dead serious about that. Anyway, so Dallas kicks. Oh, Ray Scott. When I did check up to see if we had to do him again. No, he got fired in 1974 by CBS. So I think.
I wonder why.
Yeah, and then Pat Summerall took his job. I think Pat Summerall just thinking, this is what I'm not gonna do.
Yeah. Right.
Dallas to kick off. Mike Clark has the honors. 10-year pro overall in his career. He was a Pro Bowler in '66 with the Steelers, and this year he did not miss a single point after touchdown. Mercury Morris receives it at the 6 and runs for 20 yards. And Miami starts on their own 26. They didn't do a little graphic for the starters like they did in Super Bowl III. We had fun with that because they were just showing off everything that they could come up with. But here are the starters. Quarterback Bob Greasy, running back Jim Kick, fullback Larry Zonka, wide receivers Paul Warfield and Howard Twilley, tight end Marv Fleming, left tackle Doug Croissance, left guard Bob Kuchenberg, center Bob DeMarco, right guard Larry Little, right tackle Norm Evans. And on defense, listen to this.
Yeah.
Left defensive end Larry Cole, left defensive tackle, my favorite name of all sports, Jethro Pugh. Right defensive tackle Bob Lilly, right defensive end George Andre, left linebacker Dave Edwards, middle linebacker Leroy Jordan, Chuck Howley at right linebacker, Herb Adderley at left corner, right cornerback Mel Renfro, strong safety Cornell Green, free safety Cliff Harris. Holy shit.
Yeah, this was a stacked Hall of Fame Super Bowl.
Yeah. And both teams are interesting, right? You can see relatively young, early career quarterbacks, right? And then you offenses built on the running game, and they both do the sort of plateau. They share it. They have the Dolphins have 2, the Cowboys have 3. They're all trading in, and then they're building these fantastic defenses, right? Doomsday defense, and then the Dolphins are emerging in the no-name defense. So, and this would really, it's interesting. 1971 season, 1972, the Super Bowl is we are seeing right the early 70s pro football mirrored in these two teams of how the game was played at that time, and the coaching, solid coaching, and then getting the teams competitive and right now, not obviously raising to the top and getting to the Super Bowl. But this is pro football in the early 70s.
Miami's their first play is actually a pass, which is interesting because this team was built on their offense is totally built on the ground game. Their 2 running backs, I think they led the league in rushing, I believe. Miami did. But pass intended for Twilly, but Leroy Jordan got his hand up, deflected it. Kick rushes for 7, goes 2nd and 3. They give it to Kick again, but this time he's stuffed for no gain. Tackled by Dave Edwards. And Paul, I want to ask you about Dave Edwards. I don't remember this name, but I was looking him up. So 181 games. John Madden, according to the Wikipedia bio, Madden says that he had people study him on how to play tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, he was that unique role in terms of being able to cover guys out of the backfield, cover the tight ends, which was beginning to be more of a part of the game, right? That's another thing we find in the 70s, right? You go through the decade, a lot of the annual pass reception leaders were actually running backs. Tight end would start that evolution. And yeah, he was a unique player for a skill set, fit into the flex defense. And Landry built this defense almost over a decade and have the pieces that all fit. And he was a great fit role player that had a specific, way that he had to work on the game and had a task, and was really a good, solid player for a number of years. Kind of shadowed the accolades that were given to guys like Leroy Jordan and Chuck Howley and, of course, Bob Lilly. But a great, solid player.
So Miami's got a punt right away, so 3 and done. Not a great start. Larry Seipel's their punter. Punts it for 45 yards. One thing that I noticed right away, man, the kickers and punters got a lot better since the first game we watched. Yeah. Holy crap! They could not, especially in the last Super Bowl 3. There's not even follow through.
Yeah,
with the legs. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. A lot of bad punting and a lot of crazy field goal, and you could tell the lack. We talked about it at the time, right? The lack specialization in terms of coaches training technique, and you're starting to see it now where teams are putting more and more weight on that. And games are closer, teams are more competitive, as we just mentioned, right? Super Bowl the year before was the first one, won at the last second by a field goal. So yeah, all of a sudden that's not a third part of the game. It's a pretty important, going to be emerging pretty good, important for field position and for points.
All right, so I'll introduce then the Dallas starters on offense. Quarterback Roger Staubach. Running back Dwayne Thomas, fullback Walt Garrison, wide receivers Lance Allworth, Bob Hayes, tight end Mike Ditka. I forgot all about him as a Cowboy. I try to forget him as a coach because I'm a Saints fan. Damn trade, stupid trade. Anyway, left tackle
Ricky Williams didn't live up to your expectations.
No, but he traded the whole draft class for a player he might have got anyway.
I know. And
crazy.
20 years later, say you don't draft a running back in the first round.
And how did he convince him to wear a wedding dress?
Yeah, crazy.
What the hell?
Yeah. Ditka was a real character, and that kind of reached the pinnacle of sort of like jump the shark at that point.
Yes. Yeah, and he had to do it with the Saints.
Did you think Ditka was going to put on the wedding dress?
No.
There you go.
No, I don't.
But I'm sure that was Sports Illustrated that came up with that idea. I'm sure it didn't come from Ditka. And he probably went to whoever was doing that. I'm not going to put on a wedding dress.
I'm segueing out of this, but just really quick here. Do you guys remember a hockey player named Alexander Daigle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So he was so this when I was living in Ottawa, right? So somehow the Ottawa Sun got him to put on like one of the sexy nurse costume.
Okay. I have no recollection of this.
Well, I was remember we're all looking at that like this is our superstar, this is our Gretzky.
Well,
Later that year, he got in trouble because he said, "Oh, so you pack your bags yourself?" And yeah, I put in a bomb.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember.
something to that effect. But he
Yeah,
made a
yeah.
bomb joke, and
I remember
not
that.
too right. Anyway, offensive line: Tony Liscio at left tackle, John Nyland left guard, Dave Manders at center, right guard Blaine Nye, and right tackle Rayfield Wright. On defense, we've got left defensive end for Miami, Jim Riley, Manny Fernandez, who we'll see a lot of this game, left defensive tackle, Bob Hines, right defensive tackle, Bill Stanfield, right defensive end, left linebacker Doug Swift, middle linebacker Nick Buonaconti, right linebacker Mike Cullen, left corner Tim Foley, right corner Curtis Johnson, strong safety Dick Anderson, and free safety Jake Scott. First play is to Hayes, who caught it from behind the line of scrimmage, but got 5 yards. Ray Scott's mentioning the great story of Tony Liscio. Says that's a great story.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the story was. So do you want to share that, Paul?
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird set of circumstances. He was actually in his second stint with the Cowboys. He had started at left tackle until midway through the 1970 season when Ralph Neely, who was one of their best linemen at the time, took his place. They then traded Lisco to San Diego during the following summer. So that would be the summer of 71. And that was the deal that brought Lance Allworth to Dallas to fill a need the Cowboys had at the second wide receiver position. Well, when the Chargers sent him on to Miami, Lisco decided, "Oh, I'm done with the game. I'm going to retire." And he would go back to Dallas, and he got into real estate. Well, Neely broke his leg partway through the 71 season, and the Cowboys were desperate. Landry called up Lisco and said, "Hey, listen, you're familiar with the system. I want you back." And so he came back to the Cowboys and is a starting lineman in the Super Bowl, having jumped between Dallas, San Diego, and Miami, and back to Dallas in a span of less than a year. So it got a crazy set of circumstances.
And this would be his final game. What a way to go out. 2nd and 5, Dwayne Thomas rushes for 8 yards. So they got first down on the 34. I wasn't that familiar with Dwayne Thomas, and boy, did I become familiar with him. Lots to dissect on this guy. Basically, at first, I'm reading that he was robbed. They say he was robbed of the MVP because he wouldn't talk during press week. There's a lot more than that. Thomas was only in his second year, but he was, I hate to say it, but he's kind of a head case from everything I've been reading.
He was really
get fined, or I'm here just so I don't get fined and never said anything. So everyone wants to do John Lynch and what he did. Well, Dwayne got ahead of you on that one, and he did precisely that. He was there just because he had to be there.
Well, he wasn't talking much that whole year. So at the end of his rookie year, he was upset that Dallas didn't renegotiate his contract because he had a really good rookie year. And this second year, but no, what happened? They forced a trade out because they just like, you're not worth it. He called Tex Schramm deceitful, Gil Brandt a liar, and Tom Landry a plastic man with no personality, not a man at all. Well, he's definitely right on Landry for that, for maybe being plastic.
I think it was Tex Schramm that came back and said, "Well, at least he got 2 out of 3 right."
Oh, did he say that? That's all.
Yes.
That's awesome.
That's great.
So now, Dwayne Thomas was a guy before his time in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you think about it for a moment. He was drafted in 1970, and they had scouted him from a small college. By the way, they had Cliff Hill in 1969 was rookie of the year at running back. They already had that. And then in 70, they drafted Thomas, who ended up, having a really good season, as you mentioned, rookie of the year. And of course, nowadays you might, well, maybe not so much now, but maybe a decade or so ago, you'd get rookies wanting to renegotiate a deal early. In the 1970s, nobody was renegotiating any deals at all. No one in the league was doing that. There was nothing like that. So it was really unprecedented for any guy, let alone a rookie coming off that season, to insist that he was underpaid. They all were, not only just the Cowboys, but league wide.
Right.
And then, went on this sort of season long kind of, I'm not going to talk to my teammates, the coaches, the media, nobody. But when you watch this game, and I've seen clips of it, and you look at how he played, and you're like, oh my God, what a player, size, speed, he had it all. One of his big advocates was actually Jim Brown, both personally and professionally. But just, and as you're going to see as we conclude later, this was a pinnacle of his career. But what could have been? A lot of issues to unwind. I think a lot of, an era when players and coaches were the leaders. You did what you were told. No one defied coaches, and nobody defied a guy like Tom Landry. He was a guy a decade or more ahead of his time of this sort of players putting their well-being and their financial interest ahead of everybody else, and challenging management and coaches, and being very outspoken and using the media as a means to do that, which is interesting in this case because he used the media by not talking to the media, which of course all frenzy, especially as you're going to see after the post game of this game. But a lot of it is lost. Paul Zimmerman wrote a great book about Dwayne Thomas, which if you ever get a hands on it, kind of goes through a lot of that. And he's still alive, and he gives interviews. I mean, he admits a lot of challenges and issues he had with authority and mental health, and there were probably some other alcohol and drug abuse issues on there. But if you set all that aside, watch him play in this game. What a running back.
They even tried to trade him actually before the season. Actually, They did trade him. They traded him to New England, and within a week, he says no. Like he walked out there too, and then in a weird.
The league had to intercede and basically void out the trade because the Patriots are saying this guy won't even get on the field. He's just being belligerent, and that's how close he came to not coming back, because the Cowboys were, they had Kelvin Hill and they had Walt Garrison. They had the running backs, so they could afford to get rid of him. But no, he ended up coming back. And when he came back, that's when he said, like, I'll play, but I'm not talking to anybody, even my teammates.
And this was the pattern he kept doing. He was, at the end of the year, they traded him to San Diego. He again refused to report. The Chargers placed him on the reserve list, so he didn't play the entire 73 season. Traded to Washington, but in over 2 years, he only had 442 yards. I'm guessing, I don't know, I didn't quite see what it was why his production fell off. But after that, he asked for a salary increase, which is interesting because he wasn't particularly productive. You'd have 4 more stints and would be waived from all of them. The Hawaiians in the World Football League, Dallas again, British Columbia Lions, and finally Green Bay. So this is maybe the biggest what ifs, I think, of sports.
I think his rare combination of size, speed, and overall talent was a teach to teams for many, many years, hence that pathway that you're describing, but could just not stay healthy or put it all together, have the mental wherewithal and the focus and effort to kind of, he could have been one of the greatest running backs of his era. When you see the game, you see the potential.
2 words that were never put together before was mental health in this time. And it wasn't.
Not at all.
Yeah, because realistically, if you've got a problem with every team, it's probably you. But who could he talk to? Nobody. Anyway, so 1st and 10 on the 33. Staubach drops back and he gets sacked. Manny Fernandez sacks him. That's the first sack of the game. And Fernandez, even though Miami didn't do particularly well today, Fernandez was great in this whole game. 2nd and 16, Staubach rushes for a yard after the pocket collapse. And 3rd and 15, Staubach's incomplete to Allworth, but it would have been out of bounds anyway. Dallas punts. The punter, Ron Woodby, only went 29 yards, mainly because just a fantastic balance that was perfect for Miami. And they started on their own 42. After a great block by Little, Zonka rushes for 12 yards, and Miami's in now Dallas territory, but Zonka fumbles. Hadn't fumbled all year.
Yeah.
And who was it recovered by?
Chuck Howley.
Yes, Chuck
Who,
Howley.
as we're going to see, one could argue was the best player in this game as well as the previous Super Bowl. He was certainly the best defensive player in this game. And of course, the defenses were the strength on both sides of how this game was playing, as well as we previewed that case. But yeah, he had another great game in another Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. So Dallas is 1st and 10 on their own 48, 9:18 left to play. Thomas rushes for 2. Fernandez again gets the tackle. Before the next play, Scott, the idiot Scott, mentions how, Shula, he would like to sort of go to 500 here in Super Bowls. Oh, and by the way, Tom Landry's been here before too. He'd go 500. Hey, idiot.
Very astute analysis.
Oh, God, yeah.
And it's the universal Buchner announcer voice that I keep coming back for.
I didn't say all my impressions were good. None of them. They're definitely unique, though. I don't think anyone does them quite like I do.
No.
So remember, Ted, put up master impressionist. All right. For the record, neither of them did finish with a 500 record, 2-4 and 2-6, respectively. 2nd and 8, Staubach escaped a sack to rush for 5 yards. Again, Fernandez is the tackler here with Wanakante. And 3rd and 3 was looked like the exact same play. And Dallas's O-line isn't having a great time here in the first half on any kind of pass, because they've collapsed a lot in the first quarter. Staubach, though, was able to rush for 3 yards. He was more mobile than I remembered him.
Yeah. Well, Roger the Dodger, right? He was one. I mean, there were others, but again, he has just one of those reputation, one of these scrambling type quarterbacks, because he was a pure athlete. The guy was. There's just no doubt about that, and probably one of the hard-nosed, most competitive players that ever played in the NFL. There's stories that I think he had a ping pong match once with Charlie Waters, and he got so mad when he lost the game that he threw the ping pong paddle and hit Cliff Harris in the head with it. But yeah, very unique skill set. And yeah, again, this offense, these players in the whole league was the run focus and the passing and Roger Staubach by the mid to late 70s, right, was one of the top passing quarterbacks in the league, but he's not there yet.
Right. I mean, like they even mentioned Charlie Morton because one time when Staubach got hurt, I mean, it was a pretty capable backup.
Yeah.
But still enough for the first down. So 1st and 10 on the Miami 41. Garrison now gets it, rushes for 8, and then again for 10 yards. Scott calls Garrison a rodeo cowboy, and I look it up. He really was.
He really was.
Yeah. Turned out.
Do you know what he got as a signing bonus when he signed with the Cowboys?
What?
What do you think a true authentic cowboy, which is what he was, would like for this signing bonus at a time when teams gave players virtually nothing?
Well, let's see. The last cowboy film I watched was Brokeback Mountain. So,
oh, wait a minute. Well, we're not going to go that way with this.
Actually, good story about my
dad.
No, what was it?
It was a horse trailer.
It was a horse trailer. That's awesome.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah. I mean, hey, you need one. He's a rodeo cowboy. I don't have it. Yeah.
It's probably more than what other guys were getting for bonuses.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. He was a cowboy. He was, of all the cowboys, he was a true, grown up culture, heritage cowboy. Yeah.
There you go. That's actually the second podcast in a row that Glenn's been a part of where we actually talked about a real cowboy.
No, I was going to mention that. At least this one, yeah.
It turned out also he was a spokesman for Skull.
Yes. And I believe he might have no, I can't be quite sure. I know years later, he became an advocate against it because of the health risk. I don't know whether he himself was inflicted with mouth cancer or some variation of that. But I remember many years later, he regretted and he sort of became an advocate, right, for stopping such a bad, terrible habit that creates a lot of health concerns. So it's kind of interesting. But at that time, right, smoking, beer, alcohol was a huge, obviously, promotion TV in a way a lot of players supplemented what was very poor salary, because these guys worked in the off season. Most of them were making kind of money than even the average worker was at the time. So a lot of them were looking for those kind of corporate sponsorships and that. And that's what he did. Yeah.
That's why a lot of them went into wrestling.
Yep.
True.
All right, so Dallas got the first down on the Miami 23, and the pocket collapses again on the first down. Riley sacks him for a 13-yard loss. This was Riley's last game, 15 sacks over 5 years, all with the Dolphins. And again, wrote down, like, what the hell is going on with this line? If I didn't know what was going to happen later, I'd think that this is going to swing really, really bad. Summerall punked out Scott here because he says, well, I don't know what happened there. There was nobody open. Well, all but one, Stallworth was wide open. Just left him twisting there. Scott refers to the Dolphins defense, who by their own moniker was, and this just happened this year, apparently called the no-name defense.
Yes.
Which was somewhat accurate, but that was not much longer. There's some conjecture as to how it came from. From what best I can tell, it was coined by the defensive coordinator, Bill Arnsparger, after they beat the Colts previously. But a lot of these people would become pretty big names.
Yeah.
Staubach finally gets his first completion, 18 yards to Bob Hayes, so he gets most of it back, 3rd and 5, and then to Thomas for 11 yards. So it's 1st and goal on the Miami 7. Thomas rushes for 4, and then the footage is lost. So we missed Garrison with the 2-yard rush, pass to Thomas for no gain, and Clark kicks a 9-yard field goal. So 3-0, 3 points off turnovers. 2:12 left in the first. Clark kicks off for 55 yards. Hubert Ginn gets a nice return, 32 yards and at the Miami 37. Kick rushes for barely a yard, incomplete to Warfield, and got lucky there because Greasy threw into double coverage with Harrison Renfro. You're lucky. It was a beautiful collision. I shouldn't love it, but I do. 3rd and 9, Greasy scrambles, and then he gets sacked by Bob Lilly, and it was a 29-yard loss. I was looking and I couldn't find whether this was the biggest negative play in Super Bowl history.
It still is. It's still
okay.
A loss of 29 yards is still a Super Bowl record. And yes, this is, again, when they do the Super Bowls and they always show one clip, like through all the historical games. If they're going to show a clip of this game, that's the one they're showing, because it's early in the game. It's earlier than I thought it was, and it wasn't impactful, in terms of a late play, but it was critical. But it did kind of show the dominance of the defense, and it highlighted Bob Lilly, whose previous Super Bowl highlight, by the way, was the year before, after the game, when the players were walking off the field. He ripped his helmet off when they lost to the Colts and tossed it way up in the air out of frustration and anger after over a decade and still being next year's championship. So some folks have sort of put those two images and video clips side by side and to show, in this case, this play being sort of his ability to sort of like rise to the occasion and kind of highlight who I view to be the greatest Dallas Cowboy player. And I would still consider him, although there's a lot of competition, to be on Mount Rushmore of defensive tackles in NFL history.
I thought Ryan Leaf was the greatest Cowboy of all time.
What's that?
I thought Ryan Leaf was the greatest Cowboy of all time.
I think he's further down the list somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Cowboy, that was his nickname.
Ryan Leaf's nickname was Mr. Cowboy?
No.
Oh.
Well, the first first round draft pick in Cowboys history and their first Pro Football Hall of Famer.
There you go. Miami is going to be forced to punt, but it's the end of the quarter, so they'll punt at the start of it. And the quarter, 3-0 Dallas. Seitel punts, very, very good one. So again, kicking and punting have gotten a hell of a lot better. Fair catch by Hayes at the Dallas 46. Scott mentions that Dallas had 73 yards, Miami 19, 0 in the air. So it's really bad start for Miami all around. Garrison rushes up the middle for 5, and then Thomas for another 5 on the right. 1st and 10 on the Miami 44. Staubach goes deep for Hayes near the end zone, but Tim Foley, who had another good game, breaks this up. kind of an unheralded even for the no-name defense. 11 years, all with Miami, 22 picks, Pro Bowler in 79. So he had a nice career. And so obviously with the 2 Super Bowls back to back. 2nd and 10, we get a screen to Garrison, gets 4 yards. And 3rd and 6, it's incomplete to Allworth, but it would have been out of bounds anyway. Again, kicking still hasn't advanced that much because Scott mentions how they're not going to try a 47-yard field goal, which everyone would try now. This is actually something that Scott gets right because they didn't. Dallas punts and it's a touchback. So Miami's going to go with what still brought them. They're going to keep rushing. Kick for 9 gets rushed out of bounds. Kick again this time for 2, so we got a first down on the 31. Finally gets his first completion. It's Howard Twilley for 20 yards. Well, we're getting something going here. First down on the Dallas 49. Zonka rushes for 3. And Scott mentions how great the rushing was. 738 yards by kick. Zonka with 1,051. That's good. That is damn good, especially for that year, for that era. 2nd and 7, incomplete to Warfield, who was covered by Renfro. And 3rd and 7, complete to kick, but that's only 4 yards. Leads to a field goal attempt of 49 yards by Garo Yeprenian.
Yep.
I think he was the first that would sort of usher in this whole wave of foreign kickers. Yeah. I think Saturday Night Live in 1986, they did their Super Bowl Shuffle parody, and it was all foreign kickers. I can't wait till we discuss Ali Haji Sheikh.
Yes, we'll get there.
But it's no good, and it's actually short. So that's wouldn't happen today. But again, it's still a lot better than what we saw in Super Bowl 3 and in the Ice Bowl. Well, the Ice Bowl, they all get a pass, but Super Bowl 3, they do not. Okay, so Dallas has it on their own 20. And their rushing game is just going so much better than Miami's. Thomas rushes for 10, Garrison then for 17, and they're at their own 47. Garrison gets it again, no gain. And something that was interesting, Scott mentions how the tight ends were running in to call the plays. So this is, again, something that doesn't happen now. So you've got, when was the year they finally allowed it so that the quarterback would have from the, like, getting their things from the offensive coordinator? Like, what year did that start?
I don't know, but I think it's been a lot longer than we might think. But when you go this far back in NFL history, a lot of teams shuffled players in and out to serve that role on offense. The Cowboys at one point, I think, used to do it with their guards. Receivers would be another position that would happen. In this case, the Cowboys were using 2 tight ends in that role. So it is kind of the era where, just getting that communication to be clear from the sidelines in, that was the way to make sure that and again, here's the thing. Roger Staubach, early in his career, would be a Pro Football Hall of Famer, one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, did not call his own plays. Think about that for a while. Most quarterbacks in this era did not. That would shift. And he would actually, one of their long-standing disputes between him and Landry that eventually kind of worked out throughout the 70s was Staubach wanted to call his own plays, and eventually that would happen. But now, no, you are getting coaches telling the quarterback, this is what you shall call. And they weren't audibling at the rate they are now and having options for it. It was, you call the play. And if it breaks down, run. If not, call the play, hand the ball off or throw it and stick to it. Although some of the most famous plays in Roger Staubach's career were ad-libbed, including the Hail Mary in 1975. But shuttling in the plays, get it right, because the offensive was designed and the play calling was designed to take advantage of weaknesses that Landry saw in the defense. That's how teams strategized and played, was to teams' weaknesses. And you just kept, in this case, pounding the ball, looking at ways to take advantage of whatever the defense would give you. And that was the strategy and play calling, and was not left up to the quarterback.
Well, the next 2 plays that he called weren't good. Rushes for 2. Garrison rushes for 2, and Staubach went to Ditka, who dropped it. But he'll atone for that much later on. Not in New Orleans. Yes, I'm bitter.
The horse is dead.
Exactly. Decades later.
Yeah. I just figured I finally forgave Vince Carter, but that's another story.
Well, just going back to your Saints soapbox, you guys do have a Super Bowl.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
So hang on that.
Yeah, that's true.
Stop. Don't go there. Very bad enough I had to watch this Dallas Miami game. You're gonna bring up Super Bowls now.
You've been to 4?
Moving along.
Moving on, yes. Dallas punts, not the best punt for Woodby, 26 yards. So it's just going to start. So Miami will be 1st and 10 on their own 27. Starts off incomplete to Warfield. Zonka rushes for 2, 3rd and 8. Complete near the edge to kick, but that's only 6 yards. So 4th and 2, Miami's 3 and out again. Seipel punts, and Dallas will begin on their own 24. And Dallas is playing Miami's game much better. Thomas rushes for 5. Screen to Thomas. That gets another 1st down, 6-yard pass. So Dallas has got 1st and 10 on their own 35. Thomas again rushes for 5. And a pitch to Thomas gets another 6. Thomas is definitely proving why he should have won the MVP. If he's got any reason to be bitter, was he bitter about that? Because you read the book, right?
Yeah, I think he was, but it's sort of all wrapped in the whole sort of anti-hero against the media kind of persona and approach. I think it was just yet another, for him, another, the media is against me, doesn't like me, the team's not supporting me, yada, yada, yada. It was just another knife in the back, if you want to use that expression.
Right. I couldn't tell whether they said like they changed it last minute to Staubach. So it's not very clear. Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's sort of a myth and rumor we can talk about at the end of the game, but yeah, the way that it voted on and how there was, he was a fine MVP game MVP, but there was some suggestion that, maybe there was a bit of a coordinated effort to give it to Staubach, who would graciously accept it and confront the media and all that kind of usual stuff, whereas they knew Thomas wouldn't do any of that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you might have done a TO thing before TO. He would have accepted it on his own, maybe at his alma mater or something. Get his own jacket. That's awesome. Well, Garrison rushes for 1 yard, and then Staubach passes to Allworth for 21. So now they're at the Miami 32. Hill rushes for 13 yards. So Calvin Hill, that's your 3rd best rusher, and he's doing a great job today. Yeah. Hill then again, Hill actually had a pretty good year. He was the UPI Rookie of the Year, 4-time Pro Bowler, over 6,000 rushing yards, 42 touchdowns, 2,861 receiving yards, 23 touchdowns. Great career.
Yeah.
Dallas has got 1st down on the 19. Hill gets it again, rushes for 7. 2nd and 3 of the 12, and we're at the 2-minute warning. Hill gets the ball again, rushes for 5, 1st and goal at the 7. Staubach finds Allworth in the close corner in the end zone, and we've got touchdown! Touchdown! A touchdown! For those listening, it's my dog. She's showing it's a touchdown. I thought she was a good call. The extra point is good, and it's Dallas 10, Miami nothing with 1:20 to go. The kickoff was on TV, but went out of bounds. Led to a re-kickoff, which was the first penalty of the game. Kickoff now at the 35. Morris returns a squib kick to the Miami 32. Somewhere, Sarah Fuller watched that kick and was very inspired when she was briefly a college punter at Vanderbilt. No? Okay.
No, not going to go. Given where we are in this state of sports and females playing males and males playing female sports, no, not going to go there.
Okay. Miami's guys it on their own 32, minute 10 left. Greasy completes to Warfield for 5, 2nd and 5. He completes then to kick to the 48, so we got a 1st down. 1st and 10 on their own 48. Incomplete to Mandich, the tight end, but Dallas was offside. So it's first and 10 on the 47, but only 22 seconds left. Greasy completes to Warfield to the Dallas 24, but now we've got missing footage again.
Yeah.
Damn it. So incomplete pass to Warfield, and it was a field goal by Yepremian to end the half. So all of that we don't have.
And we don't have a halftime show either.
Yeah. And we wonder why the Dallas defense suddenly let the Dolphins march down the field. Because they went into a prevent defense, apparently. Again, think back in this era, that's what teams just did. They played the odds, and you wonder why all of a sudden you see the Dolphins have that quick success when, yeah, as you pointed out earlier, Kirk, the Cowboys defense was really dominating, shutting down the run, and really holding Dolphins at bay for almost the entire first half until now. Hence, the prevent defense, which did not prevent Dolphins from getting into position and getting that field goal right before the half.
Well, yeah, as Glenn said, there was no halftime show, and we were lucky. It was a tribute to Louis Armstrong, who had early passed away.
Did you look this up?
Yeah, I looked it up, featuring Ella Fitzgerald, okay, and Carol Channing. I never understood why this person was a celebrity.
She was in 2 Super Bowl halftime shows. And that surprised me. I kind of cheated on the podcast. I did a show when I was in Antarctica, and we did a pre-Super Bowl radio show. And the hosts went back to all the halftime shows, and he said, "Glenn, do you know who was in this 1972 halftime show?" And I'm like, "No, I can't." Well, Ella Fitzgerald and Carol Channing. Now, I don't remember Carol Channing having that much of a voice that you would want to hear her sing. So you could have knocked me over with a feather when you told me she was in 1, let alone finding out she was 2.
No, I was gonna make a really bad joke there. I actually decided not to.
Do you have a Carol Channing impression?
No, I do, but I'm not gonna do it. Or maybe, okay, I'll do the impression. All right, Winnie, cover your ears because it's gonna be real.
That's about right. Yeah,
that sounds about. Yeah.
Woman couldn't sing, had this awful, awful voice. Funny looking as all hell. I don't understand them. Celebrities of the 70s didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Commentators mentioning that Dallas had 4 successful third down conversions. Miami had none. Miami kicks off. Ike Thomas, who was a rookie, returned it to the Dallas 29. So Dallas is the ball first and 10 on their own 26. We do see a stat graph. Shows that Dallas is dominating everything. Miami's winning nothing. Garrison rushes for 3, 2nd and 7. Pitch to Thomas, 3rd and 3. Staubach to Hill for 12 yards. We got another first down. Dallas 1st and 10. Their own 48. Thomas, this was my favorite rush by him. It was only for 8 yards, but he broke multiple tackles to do it. Gets to 2nd and 2, gets the ball again. Even this rush was actually better, but 23 yards. Dallas first down on the Miami 22. They have a trick play that Hayes rushes this for 16. Gets to the Miami 6. Garrison rushes to the 3, 2nd and goal. Thomas goes in for 3. Hold on. Touchdown.
So apparently that was a Staubach audible.
Oh, okay.
The only one apparently he called in the entire game. He was supposed to roll right, but he noticed the defense was shifting, was in the game. He knew the pressure would cause a problem, so he changed it to a quick pitch to Thomas, ran left for the touchdown. Also, interesting enough, we would later find out both teams did make halftime adjustments, given what they'd seen in the first half. Because the Cowboys were basically were running all over to some degree, and using Nick Monicani as kind of their, looking off his play and kind of blocking him out of the play. The Cowboy, Shula decided, okay, well, I'm going to tighten up my defensive linemen, close those gaps in the middle. And of course, Landry thought, okay, he's going to make that move. And this is why notice in this drive, you got runs to the outside, not inside interior. That's sort of a bit tit for tat kind of chess match that both teams were going into the beginning in the second half after seeing how the first half played out. And obviously, as we can see, it was pretty successful for the Cowboys. Their adjustment worked best in terms of getting him down and scoring a touchdown and taking that 17-3 lead.
Which, the way Miami's been playing, it almost feels insurmountable. I mean, we know how this is going to end, but nothing for Miami has really worked. And
I think the problem was that Shula was taking offensive advice from Richard Nixon. And that's true. Boy, Ray Scott pointed that out twice, where the president of the United States called Don Shula, I guess like 1:32 in the morning, to give him advice on what plays to run. And I'm just, and the fact that Shula acknowledged that a couple of the plays that he did run were at the advice of Richard Nixon.
Why admit that?
Exactly. But then again, this is pre-Watergate, so I guess you can do that the leader of the free world is interested in your play calling.
It doesn't matter.
Well, who knows? I mean, maybe Tricky Dick had something up his sleeve.
Well, he did. It wasn't about football.
Yeah.
Well,
no.
Maybe he recorded the other team's practice. That sounds like something he would have done.
Early Bill Belichick influencer.
There you go. I'm sure Trump would probably tell you that he could coach any team. If you do this, it'd be huge.
So in a post-game interview, Bob Lilly said that he knew when he really started believing the team would win. They asked him that. He said when the offense crammed the ball down their throats at the beginning of the third quarter, they just knocked everybody on their butts. We were going to win this game.
Yeah. And actually, that's a perfect segue because we get 17-3 kickoff. Morris returns to the 37, and in the first play, offensive play, it's Bob Lilly who tackles Jim Kick after a 3-yard rush. Zonka rushes for 2, and then Greasy's incomplete to Warfield. They just don't have. I guess they didn't really have the confidence in Greasy's arm yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is he's still a relatively young quarterback, right? And they're still evolving the passing game. And you think about it. I mean, even seasons we see now, right? You take away what has been the most successful aspect of a team all season that's got them to this game, which in this case is the running duel of the Dolphins. The Cowboys eliminate that threat, and you have to adjust on the fly to play a different game using different skill sets and different plays that you're not as well versed or it isn't to your strength. And a little bit of sort of adjustment, a panic, maybe a little bit of struggle and trying to get something to work, right? And all it ends up doing is, of course, they're just not built for that and the struggle, and they just can't maintain and can't control the ball, move the ball down the field, can't take advantage, and then you're not getting field position or advantage to take big plays, right? Kind of get yourself back into a game, and it's quickly becoming, a blowout potential, and we're only in the third quarter.
Well, Sleiple then punts it for 32 yards, fair catch. Dallas begins on their own 26, and they're doing what exactly they should do. They're just playing methodical. They're trying to eat as much clock as possible. Garrison powers for 3, Thomas then for 4, and then Staubach completes to Garrison for 7. 1st and 10 on the 40. First time one of the pitches went wrong to Thomas, or it didn't go wrong, just finally the defense snuffed it out. So Thomas has a 5-yard loss. I guess Foley came in for that. It's so weird because Miami felt like they didn't really do much right, but there was so much great play by some of these defenders. Yeah. Second penalty of the game is a delay of game. Also, too, a lot less penalties in this one than we've covered in our first 2. 2nd and 20 on a fake screen. Staubach rushes for 3 and is just obliterated by Doug Swift, which they said that he had bruised ribs. Was it more severe than that, Paul? Do you know?
No, I didn't hear any more about that. But this, of course, this is the drawback, and this is time in the game in the 70s when you started getting these running backs who were daring enough and competitive enough and had the skills to run like Staubach. They're getting pounded. And, for much of his career, and especially the first half of his career, he had a number of injuries. And, of course, the concussions eventually got him to retire after only 10 years in the league, although he was a 26-year-old rookie after serving 4 years. Mm-hmm. service in the U.S. military before joining the Cowboys, I think in 1969. But this is the drawback, right? The pounding, because once defenders saw a quarterback on the move, bad enough they were standing in the pocket and getting drilled, but when you were moving and running, you were going to get pounded. And there's no ref that's going to flow the kind of flags we see now. It was a game to be a quarterback if you're caught in the pocket or you're trying to run it, and he paid a price, as neither of his fellow quarterbacks in the era did.
Well, I'm sure he was feeling it right away. His next pass goes wide to Hayes, so Dallas is forced to punt. Jake Scott, someone we'll be talking about a lot in the next couple shows, runs it back for 20 yards to their own 42. And we missed this entire series again because was the broadcast, it's missing it. We didn't miss much. It was just 3 incompletions, 2 to kick and 1 to Warfield, and Seipel to punt again. So when footage resumes, Dallas has got it back on their own 21, and they're doing what they should do. Garrison rushes for 2, Thomas for 2, and then Staubach incomplete for Hayes, and then Jake Scott levels him.
Actually, at this point, the Cowboys have already set the Super Bowl record for rushing in a game.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Already at this point, towards the end of the third quarter, they've already done that. Which, by your play-by-play in our discussion, we can see it was coming. That was no surprise, given the emphasis. And I suspect we're going to see more of that, given the pounding that Staubach's been taking, as you just mentioned, with the blitz and then hitting on running plays.
Now, I wrote down here, you'd think at some point Shula would take more to the air, and it's not like we would see later on, like with the Dolphins teams of the 80s. I mean, they were pretty much the exact opposite. They had their air attack, and then they had limited rushing game.
Again, I think what we said earlier, it's the confidence in your quarterback.
I think so, because they're sticking with what brought them to the dance, but the dance is changing. So it's late in the third quarter. They stay rushing. Zonka rushes for 2, kick for 6, and then before the next one, it's the end of the quarter. Dallas 17, Miami 3. And for the first time, with the first play of the fourth quarter, Greasy completes a third down, which is so it took all day for this to happen. But they're still not really playing with much of an urgency. Kick rushes for 2. Greasy drops way back, so far back. I thought he was going to get sacked again, but it was a super long pass, but it was only for 4 yards. To Warfield. And then Greasy throws the best pass of the game. It's 3rd and 4, and it's perfect, right to Chuck Howley. And how it couldn't have been more direct to him if he tried. Howley returns it all the way to the 9, and it would have been a touchdown, but I think he just got too excited. He tripped over himself.
So, second turnover of the game, as I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. Here's a guy who is arguably, again, one of the top 2 or 3 players. I mean, a lot of great defensive players and plays on both sides of the ball in this game. But again, we have, for the second Super Bowl in a row, the best defensive player, and in the case Super Bowl 5, the MVP, was Chuck Howley.
He gets a touchdown. Do you think they give it to him?
I don't know. It's one of those what-ifs, right?
Yeah.
If he scores, he's got 2 turnovers and a touchdown in a low-scoring game where really Thomas is having a good game, Staubach's having an okay game, but nobody else is really, having that kind of MVP-ish type game. Who knows? He scores. Maybe he does. That would be crazy to think that the guy at linebacker will end up with 2 back-to-back Super Bowl MVPs. Crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, Dallas is now they're going for the dagger here at this point. Thomas rushes for no gain, but it was a declined penalty on illegal formation. Hill then rushes for 2, and then Staubach he finds Ditka who's wide open in the corner when he's fallen asleep. So she's not going to be used as a prop for this. But yes, touchdown Dallas. Dallas 24, Miami 3. This is it. If I'm a Miami fan watching this, I don't know if I'm turning the channel or if I'm leaving the room. I don't know. I mean, you want to hope, but you don't see much.
No, if you're a Miami fan at this stage of the game, you're just better luck next year. Let's look forward to 73.
I think also too, like Paul was saying earlier, this is only a team that's 5 years old. For them to get here is pretty damn impressive. So there wasn't that level of expectation. Like when I grew up like in the 80s, it was almost like they expected to win every game. Like there were teams like that, Miami, San Francisco. So like it's Super Bowl or bust. That wasn't them yet.
No.
I don't think their fan base. If there is someone who remembers that and is a Dolphins fan, please let us know. I'd love to know what your thoughts were watching us. Punt. Oh, sorry, not punt. Kickoff. Morris gets to the 23. So first down on their own 23. And finally, it's a pass on the first down. It's to Zonka, and he gets 16 yards out of it. It was just a dump off. So that was all the credit in the world to Zonka on that one. Miami goes first. So it's 1st and 10 on their own 39. Kick rushes for 3. And the next play I wrote down was Miami's best offensive one of the game. Marv Fleming is all alone. So must have been blown coverage. Something went wrong there because he's all alone right in the middle, and it's a 27-yard pass. And it could have been a lot worse. Miami's got 1st and 10 on the Dallas 32. Zonka rushes for 6. And 2nd and 4, Dallas runs a safety blitz, and Cornell Green comes in to flex a pass. 3rd and 4. But they're using their tight ends here. It's Jim Mandich. I think it's the first time he's caught a pass. Gets 9, and that's enough for a first down. And they're in the red zone. We didn't call it then, but it was the red zone. 1st and 10 on the 16, and fumble. Greasy fumbles. I couldn't really, it looks like he just dropped it.
Yeah.
Recovered by Larry Cole. This was his 4th year of 13 seasons, 59 unofficial sacks. So another great unheralded player on this defense. Obviously, just filled a role. And this is where it pretty much ends here. Dallas, it's 8:33 to go, and Dallas is just going to eat up clock. This is just a perfect drive in so many ways. Thomas rushes for 4, Thomas for 2, and then a 3rd and 4, 21-yard pass to Ditka. 1st and 10 now on the 41, and Thomas rushes again. Garrison rushes. Why did I write wishes? Well, rushes for another first down, 17 yards. Dallas is already at the Miami 29. Staubach in the next play made something out of nothing. Drop back, found nobody, and rushes for 5. He doesn't have the most graceful run, does he? But he just eludes people. I was so blown away actually by that. 2nd and 5, Garrison just only for 1 yard. Hill gains 3. It's 4th and 1 on the Miami 20. And man, Tom Landry, I didn't know he had this asshole-ish move in him. This is good. Rather than go for the field goal, it's a fake. Dan Reeves, I forgot he was even here.
Yep.
Yes.
So he was just basically used at special teams at this point. He only had this is the 2nd last year. Here's a question for you guys. It's the 2nd last, you say it's penultimate. How come in the last year you don't say it's his ultimate year? Why do we say penultimate for the 2nd last? It doesn't make any sense. English is such a funny language.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Weren't you an English major?
Yeah, which qualified me for a job involving anything with a paper hat.
You should know the answer to this question about the penultimate and the ultimate.
I skipped that class.
Or you drank through it, one or the other.
Well, it's because I drank the day before, which is why I skipped it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I never drank during class. Did I? No.
That you remember.
No, yeah. There's a lot more rabbit holes I could go down here, and we're not. I'm actually going to take the high road for once, which never happens. But yeah, Reeves carries it for 7. He only had 3 more rushing attempts in his last year with the Cowboys, and things worked out for Reeves and Ditka here afterwards, didn't it?
Crazy to think, right? That you have, I mean, Reeves' role in this game was pretty minimal, but yeah, here you are looking at 2 coaching legends coming out of the sort of laundry coaching tree, as we now call these things. Mm-hmm. And he was actually brought in he was one of a few. Herb Adderley on defense was the other one who actually won Super Bowls 1 and 2 with the Packers. This is where, after 1970, Landry realized, okay, I got to do something different. We can't quite get to the edge, and he recognized bringing in Allworth as a wide receiver, a veteran cornerback in Herb Adderley, and what he needed was a mean, angry, aggressive, hard-nosed guy in the locker room, on the practice field, and on the field. And he went out and got Mike Ditka. And Mike Ditka said, I was brought in for that kind of leadership and attitude and to help in the blocking game. And he went into this game never expecting to catch a pass. Yet, he would. He had a pretty good game for a tight end in that era.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's like, think Charles Oakley in his later years. Oakley wasn't brought in to make buckets. Remember when the Raptors brought him in, it was just so that Vince Carter wouldn't whine.
Are you going to go on your Vince Carter spiel?
No. Raptors won. I forgive them.
Okay.
Damn Ditka.
I knew that's where it was going.
Well, a lot of it's sort of fresh. I just finally watched the Ricky Williams 30 for 30. So
it's pretty good.
It's very good. I've finally been watching all of these. I can't believe so many I haven't seen. Anyway, Hill loses 5 on a failed pitch, but the clock ticks down to the 2-minute warning. Ditka rushes.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets 17 yards all the way down to the 1. Like, holy crap. So I looked it up to see if he ever rushed before. He did twice this year, and two attempts for 2 yards. That was it. I mean, so this was his. Maybe that's where he got the idea later. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I got Walter Payton, but I'm going to get the ball to the fridge.
This is where it all started.
I mean, I know that's going to be a blow up, but we have to do that one. And just pisses me off still to no end. I'm not a Bears guy. Maybe we'll have Jack for that one. Really, Walter Payton doesn't have a rushing touchdown, but he found a way to give Fridge one. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, so next play, Hill tries to jump over the pile, but he fumbles, recovered by Fernandez. If you figured anyone's going to recover it, it's going to be Manny. Minute 48 to play. Miami has no chance to win, but I would have thought they would have played at least to try to get a score. I was not impressed by this. I mean, at least play with some dignity here.
Different mindset in that era.
I guess. Because they're just playing the clock. I mean, kick rushes for 7, Zonka then for 11, complete to Zonka for 11, and last play is just a rush. Zonka for 4. I hated this. I absolutely hated it. Maybe, you're like you said, Glenn, it's a different mindset, but I don't know. Play with some pride, man. But I think things worked out well for Miami in the end.
Oh, sure. The perfect season. Mm-hmm. Hall of Famer.
Absolutely. And and then Don Shula would later be cast as a great role as himself in Ace Ventura. I thought Dan Marino didn't do a good job as Dan Marino, but laces out.
Yeah. Should have got someone else to play Dan Marino.
Well, who do you think was better, Dan Marino and that, or Brett Favre? And There's Something About Mary.
Yeah, okay, I'll give it to Dan Marino.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, if before the Mississippi welfare scandal.
No, even before that, I'll go with Dan.
All right. Well, I guess not all football players can act. Not all of them are Lyle Alzado. So there we go. The Dallas pretty much is now cemented. Their legacy their destiny has finally been fulfilled. Fair to say?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's no longer next year's champions. Mm-hmm. They win that elusive Super Bowl, and although they were a very well-known, very successful team, obviously in the 60s, as we talked about, this would be this is another interesting outcome from this game. And of course, we know we're going to talk maybe a future podcast about what happened the next season for the Dolphins. But what you are seeing is the emergence of two of the most dominant dynasties and there would be more than one, of course, or more than two in the 1970s. This game is the launching pad in many ways. And just like Super Bowl V, right, is sort of Dallas's mirror in terms of losing the game and moving on. This game would represent a mirror game eventually for the Dolphins to lose this game and then go on to one of the most famous seasons in NFL history, the following season. But right here we are at the end of the game with, so Roger Staubach was announced the MVP. They gave him a car, and he said, well, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to give the car back. I have 3 young daughters, and I can use it. The award included a car of the recipient's choice. Previous winners had, of course, chosen a sports car, but family man, Mr. America, Roger Staubach, opted for a station wagon. And yes, Paul Zimmerman in his book would later write that from his opinion, Dwayne Thomas actually won the voting, but the editor of Sport magazine that actually sponsored the Super Bowl MVP award at the time was concerned that Thomas, how he would behave at the awards gala in New York. They were thinking even ahead of the post game, I guess. So he just decided, this guy's name was Larry King, we're just going to give it to Roger Staubach. And that's how that apparently, that's the myth or the rumor behind that. Dwayne Thomas did actually show up on the podium, when they do the interviews in the locker room with Tom Brookshire was doing the interviews, and to his right was Jim Brown.
Oh.
Sort of in support, and I think he said a few words. But, final stats real quick for us. I mean, the Cowboys doubled the Dolphins in time of possession, 39 minutes, just over 39 minutes to 20. First downs, Cowboys had 23, the Dolphins 10. Rushing, the Dolphins 20 attempts on 80 yards. Not terrible, but not enough volume, of course. Cowboys 48 for 252 yards. Both passing game, quarterback was okay. Turn yardage. Fumbles, Cowboys 1 and lost 1. The Dolphins 2 and lost 2. Penalties, again, not a lot of penalties in the game. And it was a game, attendance was over 80,000. So we're starting to see the real growth, right, in the Super Bowl as an entity. And, sort of that's where we're at in terms of, and yes, that last play that you called by Wayne Thomas was the last time he carried the ball for the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, we would not know. When you talked earlier about what happened in the subsequent years following that. But Cowboys get that monkey off their back, and the Dolphins, I think it's safe to say, got a lot of experience and built a team that would go on to make some real history.
So we're going to do Super Bowl 7 next?
I think we have to.
Okay, good. Sounds good.
I mean, I don't think it's a fantastic game, but, I think it's just the history of that whole season. Mm-hmm. And, the team itself. One of them, I think, quick to mention because of, the podcast and what we're doing here. Future Hall of Famers in this game, real quick. Dallas Cowboys, Tex Schramm, GM, Coach Landry, Herb Adderley, Bob Hayes, Bob Lilly, Mel Renfro, Roger Staubach, Rayfield Wright, and Chuck Howley. Dolphins, Coach Don Shula, Nick Bonacani, Larry Zonka, Bob Greasy, Jim Langer, Larry Little, Paul Warfield, and probably both teams have a couple other guys that should be in there as well. But yeah, 2 very loaded teams in terms of talent in that era of the late 60s into the 70s. And the Dolphins would go on to have some great success with many of these same players, and Cowboys would go through some iterations in the 70s. We'll talk more about them in future podcasts, I suspect. But not a game by a lot of measure. I think really kind of the story of this game is the Cowboys getting that victory. And now in hindsight, looking back to where this game was a springboard for both of those franchises.
Well, do you know when they started calling themselves America's team?
So that came out in after the 1978 season.
Okay.
When NFL Films was doing these season packages of highlights for every major franchise. And the story goes, every year they try to come up with a catchy title for these, yearly video summaries that NFL Films would do. And it was a producer at NFL Films who looked at all the coverage and said, wow, boy, we have all these Cowboys games on the road. They have a lot of fans. They're traveling over the country playing games. In the 1978 season, they were sort of one of the pinnacles in terms of both the league attention and media and the growth of the game. And it was a producer or someone with NFL Films that said, hey, you know what would be a great name for that Cowboys 1970 season video is America's Team.
Okay.
How it started. And then it got picked up by the media in the following 79 seasons, and it kind of just carried through. But that's how it all got started. And Tex Stram would be nothing short of a genius when it came to promotion and marketing. Ran with whatever he could, created the first modern NFL cheerleaders, all these sort of things. He just ran with that. And Tom Landry hated the label because he felt it just put a bigger target on his team. The teams wanted, especially when they came into Dallas, to beat America's Team. He actually loathed that label that they still carry with them today, although a lot of people debate and argue that, and which is fair argument, given them now won a Super Bowl since 1995. But look at the top 10 NFL broadcasts. I think 6 of them last year by the Cowboys. So they get a lot of fans, good and bad. And that label, that's where they weren't known as that at this point, but this is the genesis of that popularity of a team who, of course, this is not the beginning. In the 70s, they would have a lot of playoff success. And as the NFL media attention and public growth of the league grew in the 70s, they were a big part of that, along with, of course, many other players that became more celebrities than anything we'd ever seen before, and teams with national TV coverage and things of that nature. The timing of that was ideal with the growth of the NFL as a TV league.
Okay. It's funny to bring that up about a TV league. I read up where they were choosing which site they were going to have the Super Bowl in, and Dallas was pushing for this bid and Miami was pushing for this bid. And then Mr. Al Davis of the Raiders put a kibosh on that because he knew full well that there was a high likelihood that both these teams were going to be in the Super Bowl. So they gave it to New Orleans. And you mentioned over 80,000 people in the stands, but it shocked me that we've gotten to the TV stance where we are today, but that Super Bowl was blacked out locally. So unless you had a ticket, you were not going to see that game. And this was the Super Bowl. They changed the rule and then instituted what we all remember as the 72-hour blackout rule, where the game had to be sold out within 72 hours for it to be broadcast locally. Some of you watching this podcast might not even know what a blackout is, but yeah, back in the day, you had to sell out 72 hours prior for a game to be showed locally. And that just surprised me that they even did that with the Super Bowl, particularly when you're going to these metropolitan areas that are highly populated and you have these corporations that are paying at the time $86,000 for your 30-second commercial that's not being seen locally. But the NFL got out of their way and blossomed to the TV juggernaut they are today.
All those people in New Orleans who didn't get to see Carol Channing, I can't even imagine.
And the salute to Louis Armstrong. I mean,
Yeah.
They were denied.
I'm sure Louis was rolling around in his grave on that. Like, all right, Ella, I get, but
his freshly dug grave and buried grave. Yeah.
Yes, freshly dug grave.
Yes.
Why not piss on him while he's down there? I don't know. All right, now this is the time where I plug everything else I do. Glenn, now that Glenn's back, we brought back the Classic Sports Review. Soon will be up the last episode of last hockey game of the World Hockey Association. So check that out. And we're going to be recording maybe next week the debut of roller games. You ever see that, Paul?
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I think my favorite part is when they had a live crocodile. There's a pit and yeah.
Wow, you're really narrowing into a very niche market of your interest. Focus very narrow of people who are like, I remember that genre and that kind of event.
I don't even know why we came up with that one. Why did we come up with that?
That's a good question. I think it was the Wayne Gretzky what was the dance
Dance
show?
Fever.
And then we were going off on a tangent on that era's shows, and I think
Yeah.
brought up roller derby,
Yeah.
and then we went off into the roller derby rabbit hole. And hey, Glenn, do you remember this? And I'm like,
Probably me. It's probably my fault. We could check out the instant replay on that one, but I'm not. Or maybe I will. So there's that coming up. Glenn's also going to be guest starring on another show I do tonight. It's How the Hell Was This a Hit? And we're going to be, last time we did that, my partner, he picked a really good song. I'm kind of upset about that. He picked Bohemian Rhapsody. So we kind of dissected, because it is a very strange song to be a hit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a great song. So I wanted to give him crap. So I came up with Trio, Da, Da, Da. Oh, you have it there, Glenn? This was an actual hit.
do I gotta turn this off, or we're gonna have to use like copyrights and whatnot?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'll just let it go. Keep talking. Plug it away.
I don't think they're that worried about me. So maybe they are. Actually, the NFL was, because the NFL was, it took forever for us to get that one up, because we used some clips from that. So I'm sure it will be a lot more fun with that. But all right, well, whatever. So there's that. The last episode I did with This Crap Was on national television will be up soon, where we look at the UK version of Hit Me Baby One More Time. There's also the Vinny Makes the Hall of Fame Case 4. Last one he did was for basketball great Max Paslawski, and Max's son actually contacted him about it, so that was pretty cool. Also, if you're fans of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, like we all are, we are going to be doing it revisited. So I'm looking for some people to be part of that group. Obviously, Paul and Glenn are part of that. So all you have to do is just basically vote and know what you're talking about. Pretty easy, huh? Not asking for much. I'm setting the bar pretty low. Kind of like the actual ball.
And if you don't know what you're talking about, just sounds like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Just fake it until you make it, I guess. Or don't all know pretty quickly when some of the ballots come in. If they don't make any sense, they might kick you off. There you have it. Democracy, maybe not in action. With that, wherever you are, wherever you may be, we bid adieu from the Buchnerverse. Adios, everyone.